Welcome to Debunque. I'm your host, Andrea Houston. In 2019, Dennis Wamala left Uganda and didn't look back. He was an outspoken LGBTQ plus human rights defender who spent years at the front of a movement that was increasingly under attack. There were frequent threats to his life. He started receiving calls and texts from numbers he didn't recognize. His office in Kampala was raided, and he was under frequent government surveillance. He knew it was only a matter of time before the threats escalated to violence. When Dennis landed in Toronto, Canada, he began his journey as a refugee in a new city. But it didn't take long before he found a thriving queer community to call home. In 2023, Dennis joined Rainbow Railroad as a program officer, the same organization that helped him escape Uganda years earlier, where he now helps other queer and trans people make the same courageous journey to freedom that he did. Dennis Wamala joins me now to discuss his work and the challenges that lay ahead. Welcome, Dennis, and happy Pride Month.
Thank you so much. Happy Pride, Andrea. Glad to be here.
Amazing. So take us back to that day when you got on the plane in Uganda and arrived in Toronto. What happened when you landed? What was going through your mind? And what did it feel like?
Yeah, the day was 20th January 2019. It was one of the worst winters we've had in Ontario in a while. And so one, when I made the decision to move to Canada, it was one of the most difficult decisions of my life. I had sleepless nights deciding whether it was the right thing to do. I'd been to Canada so many times, so it wasn't that difficult for me to come in. But on my way, I had a layover in Amsterdam, and it was a long layover. I think it was about 2 hours. And while I was in Amsterdam, I was thinking, is this the right decision? It was like I still have a chance to go back. I still have a chance to think things through. And then I land at Pearson, and I was wearing a watch. I was wearing a nice watch. And so I'm in line and I get to the immigration guy and he's like, oh, nice watch. I'm like, thank you. He looks at my passport like, oh, I can see you've been here so many times. So what brings you back to Canada? And I'm like, I'm here to stay. So he laughs. He laughs and he's like, anyway, seriously, what brings you? I'm like, I'm here to stay. He's like, oh, you're serious? I'm like, yeah. So he's like, okay, step aside. And so the process begins. They interview me, they take my fingerprints and everything. They search my bags. And then the guy says, okay, I find you to be credible. I have no reason to detain you. You can go. And I was like, now all my arrangements are doomed because someone that was supposed to pick me and they've left now and everything. So the immigration officer actually helped me with my bags to a taxi. And I got onto a taxi and I rented a hotel and it was snowy. So I'm struggling with my bags and with the snow, and I didn't have warm clothing enough. And I get to this hostel and it's 4 beds in one room. And I left a whole house in Kampala, literally whole house. And now it's this one room with 4 decors, and you just put your bags in the bed. And I could not sleep, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know. But it was basically measuring going to the unknown versus the dangerous known. And it was a very, very hard. I struggled with this for over a year. Every time thinking, I'm not sure about this, but I'm very sure about what I just left. So it was about the evil, I mean, the devil you know versus the unknown. And it's a difficult situation. No one can tell you a straight up answer. It's a very complicated situation.
Absolutely. And you said you struggled with it for a year in deciding whether that was the right
For the
decision
whole
to
year, I
make.
was still thinking, do I go back? Do I stay? Do I go back? Do I stay? Also, when it comes to the quality of life you're living here versus the quality of life you are living back home, it's
Yeah,
like you step from, you're falling so many ladders down, like so many ladders down. And it takes a very brave person to withstand all these changes and say this is for the best.
what was life like for your fellow activists and human rights defenders back in Uganda? Did you keep in touch with them? Maybe paint a picture as to, what you left behind and what your fellow activists were left to deal with.
Yeah, when I left, when I decided I was leaving, one, I did not share it with so many people. I shared it only with my inner circle. Most people just found out that, I mean, I used to travel a lot, so it was not a surprise when people see me out of the country, but people realized I was in the same country over and over and I was not leaving. So they began putting one and one together, but I didn't actually announce that I was leaving. But one, I kept on working in my positions even while I was still here. There's that thing of having difficulty to let go because you believe in the work. So I kept on working a lot on Uganda. I was working online while I was in Canada. And then but of course, I'd shared with my teammates and they knew I wasn't coming back. So it was kind of a transition process, but I was working full time. But at that time, everything was kind of in disarray in Uganda, and the situation was getting worse by the day. And even when I was trying to fight with my thoughts of can I go back or not, the news that was coming out of Uganda was reinforcing the fact that I can't go back because it was getting worse. I was working closely with people and they were just reporting every day. They were reporting something worse every day. And up to today, I work closely with my colleagues every day, and it has just never got better. Just literally never got better. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And so it was because I came here in August and a few months, sorry, I came here in January and a few months later in August, uh, my mom died in a car crash,
Oh,
literally
sorry.
a couple of weeks after I'd come to Canada. And that was the biggest struggle of my life because now that was a good time for me to go back home. And I spoke to very many activists in Uganda, and you won't believe that most of them told me, this is hard, but don't come back. Because I really needed to attend my mom's funeral, and most of my friends said, Dennis, we know how difficult this is, but don't. We will. And my mom's funeral was attended by so many activists. They were like, we shall represent you. So many activists from around the world sent flowers and wreaths. They're just like, don't go, we got you. It was a difficult time, but that's how close we were as a team in Uganda.
I'm really sorry to hear that about your mom. That's awful. Oh my God, to have
And
to deal with that from the other side of the world.
it's been terrible. Let me just give you a snapshot. I get here in January. My mom passes away in August, and then uh, later COVID breaks out, and everyone is locked up, and I'm still struggling with my mom. And now you're locked up in a country, in a new country. You're all locked up alone. And then my dad dies during COVID, and then I'm like, I'm gonna jump off a building. Like I'm literally going to jump off a building. I lost so much weight when my dad passed during COVID. And I had COVID. I lost so much. I was literally going to die. I was so small, no cloth of mine could fit me. And then COVID started subsiding, and still, like, some of the people I was close with were still self-isolating. It was so lonely, it was so depressing. And then my granddad died. And then a couple of months later, my grandmom died. Like between 2019 and 2021, I don't know how I survived. I literally don't know how I survived. I lost my mom, my dad, my grandma, and my granddad. I had COVID. We went through this isolation. I I literally don't know how I survived. It was bad. It
What a dark
was
time.
bad.
And
I
meanwhile,
can't put it
you're
on.
watching Uganda fall further and further into depths of crisis.
My family in Uganda they're locked. There was a lockdown in Uganda without support. In Canada, people were getting some money. In Uganda, they just locked people up without food, without support. They just said, if you come out, shall beat you. So I had to support my brothers, my sister, my family with the mega resources I was getting in Canada. I was losing my mind myself. Oh my God. If we survive that, I think we can survive anything, honestly.
Wow. And through all of this, you kept your work. You kept being, doing activism and doing it from Canada. And through this point, you transitioned to work for Rainbow Railroad. Tell me about that process and how you, in this incredibly dark time with all this personal tragedy happening, you managed to continue this incredibly challenging work. Which is, incredible that you were able to balance all of that with everything that was going on.
Yeah, Andrea, the thing about me is activism is not my work. It's just who I am. It's literally who I am. So I don't consider it to be work. It's just, I mean, I can't avoid it. So when people come to me and say, oh, Dennis, you're so brave. Thank you for the work. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? It's just something I've been doing for 25 years. I don't know how to do anything else, literally, if I'm not speaking out for people. So
It's survival.
yeah. So when I just come to Canada, my first job was at a manager at a casino. And actually, like literally 1 week after I got that job, that's when my mom passed. So I'm working at this casino and they have this committee called Equity Committee or something like that. And so I wrote to HR, I'm like, are LGBT people represented on this committee? And HR was like, that's a good point. Do you want to lead that? And I was like, of course. And then I get onto the committee, and then we organize something around Pride, and we just posting things around the casino around Pride. Of course, there were whispers of what's going on and stuff like that. And just like that, we raised $10,000. And so we raised $10,000 for Rainbow Railroad. And here I was about maybe 3 months old in the job. So what began spreading around is this African who has come and he's an activist and he's doing things and we don't get it. And so that's how my activism is. So I was just when I'm walking into a room, I look around and try to fix whatever is not. So I was thinking of activism in Canada versus activism in Uganda. And in Uganda, of course, now they were planning to pass the law, the current law. And so I was I began working with people around Canada. How can people in the diaspora support the activists in Uganda, and that's how we managed to organize one of the biggest rallies, anti-LGBT rallies in Canada. Sorry, pro against the law in Uganda. It was so big. It brought hundreds and hundreds of people at the Danda Square. It had MPs, it had MPPs, it had government officials. It was like when I thought about this, I was literally in my bed thinking I'm going to organize a protest, and I started reaching out to my networks. And by the time it was 1 week into the protest, it had run out of my hands. It would become so big. I was like, guys, I thought about this literally in bed, and now it's all over the news. It's every. It was so huge. I was so honored, and so it just became a snowball effect from that. Then I was on Canada Drag Race, and then I was doing all these interviews. I was in magazines, and so Ribeiro just gave me a call, and they're like, "Hey, remember us?" And that is how I got to Ribeiro. Yeah.
Perfect. That's. I mean, I'm. Full disclosure. I also worked at Rainbow Railroad for a period right before you, in the period right before you, and so it's really it was such a perfect fit to bring you on as a staff person because you can really give people who are making that journey real world example of the success that is possible. For anybody who's listening who maybe doesn't know what Rainbow Railroad is, maybe give a quick explanation of what the organization does.
Yeah, just something I did not mention is that actually my coming to Canada was facilitated by Rainbow Railroad. So
Yeah, no, exactly.
I'm a CI. I'm a client of Rainbow Railroad, even though now I'm an employee. But so what Rainbow Railroad does is it's an international organization working around over 70 countries. And what we do is we help people facing persecution go to places of safety. Now, people misunderstand that by thinking we help people facing persecution come to Canada. No, that's not what we do. We take them to places of safety anywhere that is safe all over the world. So it might be Europe, it might be North America, it might be South America, it might be in Africa, as long as it's somewhere that someone feels safer. It might be within your own country. So we take people from places of persecution to places of safety. That is what we do, and we have helped thousands and thousands of people. We just last year alone, we received about 25,000. We had 25,000 requests, so we help thousands and thousands of people. And I really appreciate it as someone who has been on the other side of the world, someone who has put in a request for help and gone through the process and actually been helped, and now being on this other side helping people. I have a real understanding of what the needs are of the people on the other side and what we can do on this side and how we can bridge the gap.
Amazing. For people who are making that journey now, and arriving in Canada or arriving in other countries where it's safe or within Africa, how has that journey changed? Has the global situation, the concentration of more and more far right governments, Uganda itself and other places in Africa getting more and more anti-gay, anti-trans. How has the process for refugees been made more challenging? And how has Rainbow Railroad helped facilitate that?
Yeah, I think it gets worse by the week or by the day, not even by the year, literally by the hour. It has become considerably worse in the last 5 years. We had a string of far-right governments taking over in different places. And the thing about far-right governments is because they're populists, they try to create an enemy they can point to cover up for their failures. And unfortunately, the trans people have been the ones being targeted and immigrants. So when you're an LGBT immigrant, you're targeted twice. You're being targeted as a member of the LGBT community and you're being targeted as an immigrant. It's worse if you're a person of color. Then you're being targeted as an immigrant, you're being targeted as a person of color, and then you're being targeted as a member of the LGBT community. So it has been so hard that every time there are cuts, the first cuts go to immigration, LGBT people, people of color. And these cuts have been so consistent that even countries like Canada, that are being seen as very progressive, are revising and trying to make things subtly more difficult than they actually would be. The situation has become so bad that, for example, I'll give an example of Uganda. When the situation became so bad in Uganda, when I left and came to Canada, I had a visa to Canada, so I was privileged. I had that visa because I'd been coming to Canada to work for meetings and things like that. Those who could not do that went to places like Kenya. And we had hundreds and hundreds of Ugandans in the camps in Kenya, in the Kakuma camp in Kenya. But the government of the government of Kenya refused to process LGBT refugees and said processing them would be acknowledging that the government of Uganda did something wrong. And the government of Kenya did not want to acknowledge that. So they refused to process people in Kenya. And so after this, for years, they were in Kenya, and every other refugee was being processed. The LGBT refugees from Uganda were not being processed because there's something you need called an RSD for you to be processed as a refugee. They refused to give them that. So all these refugees left Kenya and went to Southern Sudan. It's basically jumping from the frying pan into the fire because Southern Sudan is a war zone. It's an arid area. The camp called Gorom is far worse facilitated than the Kakuma camp in Kenya. And so they have been in Southern Sudan, which has been processing them at least, but now they've also been sent out of that camp saying that everyone else is uncomfortable with them. So now they are stateless, homeless, and locationless. That is how bad the situation has been like that. But if now you look at that as the situation of LGBT people in Africa, now look at the situation of LGBT people from South America who are now being targeted because you're speaking Spanish and you look a certain way. And so you are the problem in North America. You are the one taking our jobs. You refuse to assimilate. You're crime. You're members of a gang. So there's that targeting. So the screening it's racism, but they call it fighting crime. but it's literally racism. So you have that other problem there. And then you look at those who manage to go and then they move into maybe Europe or the US, and they have made the assimilation process so difficult, so complex that you have to cross the T's and dot the I's. If not, then you're not going to be successful. It has become so hard. The numbers are shrinking. The processing time has increased so badly. Just last week, I was dealing with someone who has been in the camp for 15 years. She went into the camp when she was 30. She's now 45. That is 15 years of her life lost. 15 years of her life lost. So these things are possible, but they are just the systems are intentionally curtailing everyone from, because there are people who we've tried to advocate for to be relocated, and governments are like, oh yeah, the process is slow, But then when a lesbian woman was burnt alive in the camps in Kakuma in Kenya, and her daughter was watching her mother being burnt. She survived with extremely so many burns. She was relocated immediately. When someone I know was attacked and their hand almost cut off and it was in the press, they were relocated immediately. So the relocation is possible. It's just that they pretend that the process is so difficult, but when you expose in the media, then in 2 weeks, you're in a different country. So that means it's possible. This whole process is just there to make things more difficult than they actually should be. But to go back to your question, it's literally like putting a thread through a needle, getting people to safety. It's becoming really, really difficult. For example, if you look at the issue for Trump, as someone who works where I work, we had over 100 people who were ready. They had their visas, they had their relocation teams, they had their air tickets, they had everything. And so they are just going through what you call pre-arrival orientation. But when you go to the US, this is what you expect, this is what the weather is like, this is what, just preparing them. And then the whole program was canceled. Trump just said, I don't care. He says he's against illegal immigrants. These were legal immigrants. They had the visas, they had everything paid for. They had resettlement teams ready for them. Was like, I don't care. You're not coming. So just imagine someone has waited 5 years, going through this process. Now they are 2 weeks away, and now it's canceled. And how we have to start over. Let's find you another country and start the application process all over again. How depressing is that? That's how difficult the situation has become.
Heartbreaking. And of course, more and more countries are closing their doors to refugees, closing their doors to migrants, and it's making it more and more difficult, I'm sure, to do Rainbow Railroad's work and try and find those pathways. You mentioned Donald Trump, obviously, 2 years now. We're 2 years into the anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda. I'd love to hear about how that has impacted. You mentioned that it obviously, like any anti-homosexuality bill that's passed, it would increase requests for help for refugees. And then coupled with that, we have cuts to U.S. aid. We have all kinds of new legislation being passed to stop migrants and to stop immigration and put a halt on people traveling and escaping persecution. What has been the result of this from a perspective of working at an organization like Rainbow Railroad? How has all of this changed your work? How challenging has it been to get all of these people to safety?
I know the powers that the people who have the power to make these decisions, they look at it as politics. But it's not politics. They look at it as numbers. We want 500,000 immigrants this year. But immigrants are just not numbers. If you look behind your computer screen, those numbers are actually human beings, their faces, their sisters, their brothers, their children, their mothers. They're actual human beings. But how the politicians are masking this is they look at us as numbers. It's like when you hear people in the US saying, we don't like DEI, we are fighting DEI, because it's comfortable to say DEI, because if you actually spell out what DEI is, then it's a little uncomfortable. What are you against? Are you against diversity? Are you against equity? And then it's more difficult to explain. When you just say DEI, then it's easy. So that's what's happening with immigration. They don't look at us as human beings. the first thing they do is they dehumanize you. They say they look at you as numbers. They look at you as policies. That way, it's more comfortable for them to violate you without feeling inhuman, without them feeling ashamed of themselves, because they're not violating human beings. They're just dealing with numbers. They're not violating actual bodies. They're just dealing with policy. It's just a policy. It's not people. It's just numbers. They're just looking at the screen and saying, oh, 500,000 people. So when you cut this aid, it's not one, it's not aid. It's you're not helping. When you send this money, you're not per se helping people. You're helping yourself because one, you are part of the problem. You're literally solving a problem that you're part of. That is one. And two, if you don't deal with this, it's coming back to bite you. It's coming back to bite you. So you're not helping anyone. You're dealing with this because it's in your interest to deal with this. That is one. But two, no one is going to report about the number of people who are dying because of these cuts. No one's going to report about the number of people who are rotting in jail because of these laws that are being passed, supported by the same people who are saying, now we don't want anything to deal with those people. But you're the ones who exported those laws. You're the ones who are sponsoring those laws. You're the ones who are sending your evangelicals and sponsoring them with their family networks to go and create these situations in those countries. And when people run away from those countries, now they're a problem for you. So you go and destabilize their countries, they run away, and then you're like, oh, you're an inconvenience to us. It's you who, they did not call you to their country. It's you who went and destabilized them. I was in Uganda at the very beginning of this laws in 2014 when the Scott Lively's and the Don Schmears came and they were having all these meetings with MPs. They are the ones who, no one invited them. They're the ones who come to these countries, destabilize the countries, create situations where people can't live in those countries. And when people run away from those countries, they begin complaining that people are running away. But I wouldn't be here if these guys didn't come and destabilize my country. I would not be here. I would be in my country, but they came. We did not invite them. They came, destabilized the country, and people had to run away. So after that, so then they look at you as just red meat for their base. Or if we point at the trans people, if we point at the LGBT people, if we point at the people of color, if we point at they're the ones taking their jobs, they're the ones creating the housing crisis, they're the ones creating inflation, then now all the other failures you do, you can only say, oh, the reason inflation is not down is because I'm still fighting immigrants. The numbers are still too high. Just give me time. When the numbers come down, inflation will come down. The reason these roads are not being dealt with is because the funds are going to support the migrants. So when we deal with migrants, we shall deal with the roads. The reason you don't have a family doctor is because we brought in so many migrants, so the family doctors are not enough. So when we deal with the immigration issues, then you have a family doctor. So everything, I promise you, you can talk about cancer, you can talk about any problem can be related to immigration, like literally anything. If there's a burglary, oh, the problem is there are too many immigrants. If there's a burning forest, oh, there are so many immigrants. If someone drowns in a swimming pool, oh, you see the mother would have been seeing if they were not immigrants. Like if you get an accident, you see immigrants drive so badly, so probably. So everything will be pointed to so
Because they want, if you're blaming migrants, you're not blaming billionaires and you're not blaming corporations and the government.
And because if you don't give people someone to blame, they're going to blame the actual people. And you don't want them to blame the actual people because the people in power are there to protect the actual people to blame. So you always give the population someone else to blame so that your people are covered.
Bang on. Exactly. They blame the migrants, blame refugees, blame immigrants. So you don't look at the people who are actually writing the laws. And just to also pick up with what you were saying about the evangelicals. A lot of those evangelicals and the groups that they're attached to are now part of the administration of Donald Trump. They are the people who wrote Project 2025, who are leading this, global push to eradicate queer and trans people from public life, pushing obviously to put all of these programs and funding on the chopping block, things that affect LGBTQ people at a very acute level on the ground, HIV positive people, sex workers, and all of this work that has been disrupted, this incredibly important life-saving work. Another, I guess, picking up along with that is, with regarding the cuts and how you and just the global picture. How right now, what do you see when you look into the future on our current timeline? The state of human rights right now, and what we might see in the next 5 years.
Andrea, I really wish I could be the vessel of hope. But right now, it would be disingenuous of me to say things are looking up because things are not. Things are going to get worse before they get better. Because remember that the policies that are being enacted now in North America and some parts of Europe, we are angry because these policies are being enacted. But we haven't even begun feeling the effects of these policies. So we have to first go through the process of feeling the effects of these policies. And that's going to take some time before people can become disintegrated and say, okay, this is too much, and then it gets better. So it's going to take us quite a bit to get better because, one, as long as othering, as long as pointing the finger still wins votes, there's no reason why politicians will not do it. So as until pointing at other people stops being fancy, politicians are going to continue doing it. So for the foreseeable future, it's still it's still a winnable it's still a winnable thing to say, and so politicians are going to continue doing it, and it's just going to get worse until at that point where everyone will be satisfied that the minorities have been punished enough. Now it's time to, in quote unquote, forgive them. And that is when it will get better. But it's not going to take some time. I mean, we shall continue fighting as activists, but it's getting harder to fight. We are being given lesser and lesser spaces. We have less resources to do the fighting. So it's going to be more difficult to fight. The people we are fighting are getting more powerful. And everything we have fought for over decades is being turned over by a stroke of a pen. And so it takes you decades to achieve something, and then it takes 1 week to take that away. And so you have to do it again. So we're going to have to redo so many things we had already done. The grind is going to be very hard, very slow, very painful. At the end of the day, we shall come out on top. How long it's going to take, I cannot tell.
And I think that's got to be the call to action for a lot of people is really, this is no longer, just a fight for, people who are at the front lines. This is a fight that we're all going to feel because everybody's human rights are at risk.
And Andre, let me say something. When you say everybody's going to feel, I remember so many years ago, I used to go around Europe and North America making speeches, and I used to tell people at fundraisers and all these meetings that, listen, yes, it's happening to us in Uganda right now, but we are living in the same world. What affects us affects you. And I would see people looking at me and thinking, what are you talking about? I was born in Berlin. I was born in London. Like, come on. And I live in Toronto. And people are looking at us and thinking we are crazy. And I kept on telling them, we're in this together. If you don't fight with us right now, if someone is suffering right now, that suffering also affects you in one way or another. And people are like, just ask for the money and go away. Just stop threatening us and stuff like that. And now it's happening. It's literally happening in LA. It's happening in New York. It's happening in Toronto. Somebody's like, Canada is not a country anymore. Now they look back and say, Dennis told us. You get it? Dennis told us. So we are in this together. It's when you see something happening in Venezuela and you think Venezuela is very far. Do things creep. As long as you let them flourish somewhere else, they find a way around. They find a way around, and then they come next door to you.
Well, the images look very similar. I think for a lot of people who are watching, what's happening in Gaza, what happens in various parts of Africa with conflict and uprisings, what happens in LA, what has happened in the, recent past in Ferguson and Baltimore and many other cities, it's people on the front lines. It's ordinary people rising up against a police state, rising up against fascism. And, when fascism has a little bit of an inch, they take a mile. And it's only a matter of time before these far right governments become your government.
Yeah, when you see uh people opposing governments in Africa being arrested, being kidnapped, being beaten, and you're like, oh, we shall lecture them on democracy. And then they're like, no, what you need to do is stand up against the people doing it. They're like, yeah, we still have military interests there. And then tomorrow it's a senator on the ground, and you're like, I told you. Told you.
I guess, for last couple of questions for you, it is Pride Month. This is the time that we want to get into the streets and we want to raise consciousness and we want to bring our big tent together and get more and more people to stand alongside with us. I guess, what would you say to people in Uganda, in Toronto, anywhere listening to this? How can they do more to help and to, make this big movement even bigger?
Yeah, first, I know most people listening to me might not agree with what I say, but it's I've been saying this for a while that we people in the global north got too comfortable. And got too comfortable because people began discussing things that are not pride related during pride. Pride became a battle of the privileged and another privilege. Or you are being too extreme, you are being too noisy. We just want to have fun. And I'm like, pride is a protest. Pride began as a protest. Pride should always be a protest. But because everyone had marriage equality, everyone had, you could have kids, you could have this, you could have that. Everyone said, oh, we're not protesting anymore. We want pride to be fun. And you people who are using pride to protest against the police, you people who are using pride to protest this, you just make it more difficult for us. I will not come to pride because you guys don't want to use it to have fun. You want to use it as a protest. And for us, pride is fun. But now, when you see all these organizations withdrawing the money from pride, when you see all these rights being taken away, when you see people to far right trying to redefine what marriage means, then people say, oh, maybe we have to go back and protest. So this pride, it's my hope that it will go back to being a protest. It will go back to what pride was originally meant to be. I've participated in prides all over the world, and I always say I'm marching for those who cannot march. I know I have the privilege to be in Berlin, I have the privilege to be in London, I have the privilege to be in Toronto, I have the privilege to be in Washington. But while I'm marching there, I'm marching for those who cannot. I will never ever forget that. And let this be a lesson. Let's never forget why we do what we do. However many gains we make, however comfortable we get, let's never ever forget why we do what we do. Because when we forget why we do what we do, we get complacent. And when we get complacent, the people fighting us are never ever going to get complacent. So let pride remain the protest it has been. Protests can be fun. Protests can be fun, but let us not forget that it's a protest. Let it just not only be a party, let it be a party with a message. Let's never forget the message behind pride. That is my message today. Let's continue to have fun during Pride. It's summer, let's have all the fun, but let's not forget why Pride was started at Stonewall in the very first place. Always keep grounded. However much you think you've achieved, always keep grounded, because if you stop being grounded, you can lose what you've achieved with a stroke of a pen.
Beautifully said. Perfect sentiment. I love that because yes, pride is a protest, and I love a protest. Protests are fun, and so I think I think that's a perfect note to end on. Dennis, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today, and thank you for all you do. And I'm very excited to see you on the streets of Pride this year and protest again with you.
I'll see you around. I'm gonna be around in so many matches, so many matches.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it, Dennis. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, Andrea.